Hello, my name is Ash, a counselor in training. This is my Relatable study podcast for individuals who need help studying for their NCE, CPCE, and other related counseling exams. I'm going to go through many questions from multiple resources and make the answers relatable to both you and me. So get your listening ears on and let's get studying. In 1909, a landmark book entitled Choosing a Vocation was released. The book was written by Frank Parsons. Parsons has been called A, the father of lifestyle, B, the father of modern counseling, C, the father of vocational guidance, D, the fourth force in counseling. The answer is C. Frank Parsons has been called the father of vocational guidance. Frank Parsons has done an extensive amount of research and theory formalization of career counseling and vocational guidance, and he has become well known for vocational and career guidance, which makes him the father of vocational guidance. I would recommend looking into the types of work he has done in regards to vocational guidance as well as career counseling. What is the norming stage in group development? The norming stage is where cohesion, collaboration, and trust begin to form. Members are making an effort to resolve problems to achieve group harmony, and they are able to have more frequent and meaningful conversations and a willingness to share ideas or even ask for help. In the norming stage, these members will shift their energy to achieve the goals and show an increase in productivity in their work effort and are able to develop their own language or inside jokes within the group. When is it appropriate for a counselor to consider ending a session early? A, when the client becomes slightly uncomfortable discussing a challenging topic. B, if the counselor feels the session is not being productive. C, when the client becomes distressed or risking harming themselves or others. D, when the counselor has another appointment or a personal commitment. The answer is C, when the client becomes distressed or risking harming themselves or others, when it is appropriate for a counselor to consider ending the session early, because session ending dynamics usually call upon the counselor prioritizing validation, empathy, and support for the client and wants to make sure that the client is in a stable mood before they exit the session. I would recommend doing more research on how to ethically end the session early for the benefit of the client. What is norm reference tests? Norm reference tests are an assessment which compares an individual's performance to a normative scale. For example, taking the SAT, ACT, or even college entrance exams are examples of the norm reference test. Which statement is not true of the trait and factor approach to career counseling? A, the approach attempts to match the person's trait with the requirements of a job. B, the approach usually relies on psychometric information. C, the approach is developmental and thus focuses on career maturity. D, the approach is associated with the work of Parsons and Williamson. The answer is C. The approach is developmental and thus focuses on career maturity is not true of the trait and factor approach to career counseling, whereas the approach attempts to match the person's traits with the requirements of a job, relies on psychometric information, and is associated with Parsons and Williamson's. Those three items are true of the trait and factor approach to counseling. Focus in on when a question has the trait and factor approach because you are looking for the traits of a person and the factors, which include information, whether it's the job, the person, or other. And remember that Parson and Williamson worked together on this trait and factor theory. That is all 5 questions for this episode. Thank you for listening. Keep calm and study on.